We'll now move on to our fifth question from the Certified General Accountants of Ontario. Unfortunately, their CEO, Doug Brooks, wasn't able to be here, so the question is going to be presented by Ted Wigdor, who's Vice President of Government, Regulatory and Corporate Affairs. Ted.
Thank you, Janet, and good morning, all of you. I have a two-part question on talent attraction because there is both a domestic and international component on how to ensure that we attract sufficient talent to the financial services sector. Recent studies have forecasted a looming talent shortage due to Ontario's declining birth rate and the approaching retirement of the baby boom generation. That's assuming their stock portfolio has not taken too much of a hit over the past few weeks. This talent shortage is expected to deepen over the next 20 years, resulting in hundreds of thousands of positions unfilled, including highly paid positions in the financial services sector and positions requiring professional designations. What do you propose to make training programs more accessible, particularly those programs that will lead to a certification and position that will be in significant demand in the years to come? Secondly, as mentioned by the Conference Board of Canada, studies show that at Ontario's current birth rate, we will only replace those workers who leave the workforce, and that all net growth in the workforce will have to come from immigration. What do you propose the Ontario government should do, or encourage the federal government to do, to attract skilled immigrants to Ontario, expedite the visa and credentialing process, and allow foreign students to work and study at the same time, and allow them to find work here upon completion of their studies? Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ted. The order will be Mr. Prue, Minister Pupatello, Mr. Rossi. Mr. Prue.
Thank you very much. Some people in this room may or may not know, but I worked for 20 years in the Immigration Department before I became a politician. And in those 20 years, I saw a lot of people coming to this country with hope in their eyes, only to have that hope dashed. When they got here with their credentials, those credentials were not recognized. And I believe that we have an obligation to do something akin to what Quebec does. Quebec helps to choose their own immigrants. They have their own grid, they have their own system, they have their own visa officers, and they counsel immigrants abroad before they come here what is going to be necessary. They look at their credentials, they tell them when they get to Quebec whether they're going to have to take courses. They arrange to have those courses set up, and people can find themselves in the job of their choice in relatively short order. We don't do that here in Ontario, and we need to. We also need to look at who is coming here. In terms of students, we charge huge amounts of money to students to go to school here. And I don't have any real difficulty if the student is in fact going back to the country of origin with charging the going rate. But a lot of them stay here at the end. We know that. We encourage them to stay here at the end. And if we really want their talent in the beginning, and if we know that they are going to stay in the end, and if they're going to be used in any of the sectors, then we should be giving them a preferential rate on their school, which allows them to come here, to stay here, to work here, and to contribute to our society in the end.
Thank you very much. Minister, please.
Thanks. I think some of you will be aware of the Bridges program in Ontario, which we developed in our first term and have since enhanced and improved in our second term, a program that's specifically geared towards industry in different sectors so that when new immigrants are coming in, they're doing training and certification for the sectors that are required. And the conversation of late has been exactly how we're going to enhance those programs yet again to respond to the financial service sector specifically. We've done a tremendous amount of work on this immigration accord with the federal government. We want more, and every one we do. We're now in the midst of starting the debate again about how much more control can we have over immigration like Quebec has, and still the unfairness of the federal government and how much funding Ontario gets versus other places when we are, may not be the portal that they come in first, but they will all gravitate into Ontario, and yet those provinces are successful in getting the money from the federal government for their programming, so then we end up supporting them on our own. I will tell you, though, that the world is a very different place in terms of accreditation for new immigrants, for different occupations today than it was 10 years ago. We have wholly changed the system in 2 terms of our government. You don't hear that story that, the doctor driving the cab. If there's still some of those, it's a fellow who's been so out of the system or a woman who's been so out of school for so long that it couldn't have been possible to get them to re-enter. But we have done so much work in this area, and I'm really proud of the history we've had, and it actually matters. It matters that people do get in and get attached to our communities and get a job. They come here and expecting to do that.
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you.
Mr. Rossi.
Well, this is part of the reason we're going to miss Sandra Pupatello when she doesn't run, because always a wealth of information. Thank you, Ted. First and foremost, a strong and competitive economy is the key element in attracting and retaining talent. For all of the difficulties that a high dollar has created in a variety of sectors, there's no question that it also in selective sectors, and the financial services is one that is using it to great effect to be able to recruit the best and the brightest from around the world and from our own economy to come in, something that was far more difficult to do only a few years ago. Strengthening the economy through targeted tax cuts, red tape reduction, balanced budget, key priorities for a Tim Hudak government, and critical to ensuring that this becomes and continues to be a magnet for talent around the world. Clearly, we've got to build our own skills base as well. That's why we've budgeted for 60,000 additional spots in post-secondary education, greater coordination and cooperation with universities and community colleges, partnerships with the for-profit, but also the not-for-profit. There's phenomenal work being done by groups like Maytree in terms of board match, in terms of providing people opportunities to get Canadian experience, because that's typically the thing holding back on the credentialing and ensuring they're fully engaged in the economy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rossi. We'll now move to the sixth question, and I'd like to call on Mr. Ralph Palumbo, who's the Vice President for Ontario for the Insurance Bureau of Canada, to ask a question on behalf of the IBC. Ralph?
Thanks, Janet. My question is on municipal infrastructure. The Association of Municipalities of Ontario states that the municipal infrastructure gap is approximately $60 billion. The costs to our economy, therefore, are significant. The OECD pegs the cost of congestion in the GTA at $3.3 billion a year in lost productivity. And water damage from municipal infrastructure failures is costing Canadian insurers and, most importantly, policyholders at least $1.6 billion a year. So my question is, two questions actually. How will your party address the current municipal infrastructure gap? And secondly, does your party support alternative forms of financing, such as public-private partnerships?
Thank you very much. And the order will be Mr. Rossi, Mr. Prue, and the Minister. Mr. Rossi.
Thank you very much, Ralph. Clearly, Ontario insurers are dealing with a number of claims-related areas, including auto fraud, and so I appreciate the question. There are other elements to that claims issue, but on the infrastructure front, what's critical to understand is, despite a government that for 8 years has increased spending 80%, has doubled our debt, we still have this infrastructure gap. A Tim Hudak government has set aside $35 billion that would go towards infrastructure enhancement, largely transportation, public transit. It will also extend the gas tax to far more municipalities than currently. But clearly, to the last part of your question, $35 billion versus a $60 billion gap, we're going to have to be creative, and that's going to mean leveraging that investment in areas like public-private partnerships in order to get to the full extent of the problem. That's something that a PC government not only will not avoid, but will actively go out and seek to solve these issues, because it is a disgrace and it is a huge impediment to future economic growth with congestion, et cetera, that is plaguing our economy and plaguing our infrastructure.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rossi. Mr. Prue.
Yeah, first of all, I have to say that I'm a little disconcerted about what the Conservatives are planning to do because they are not going to continue with the upload for municipalities, which is going to cost a lot of money to municipalities who are expecting that money by 2018. They talk about the $35 billion infrastructure. That is exactly what is already in place, so I guess they're not going to touch that. They're going to change the gas tax. so that the money does not flow to cities that have transit. So places like Toronto and Mississauga and Durham Region and
Not
York
true.
Region are not going to see the tax because they are going to take that tax and they are going to
Just
give it
not
to
true.
all 444 municipalities. Absolutely true. It's what Tim Hudak said at AMO. We believe that we have to do more. What we have to do more for the cities is to take an additional $318 million and add that to the gas tax in order to bring up the revenues to municipalities to 50%. That is what we're planning to do here in Toronto, and we are simply asking that transit fees be frozen as a result.
Mr. Prue, thank you very much, Minister Pupatello.
Thank you. I just want to put a couple facts on the table, not from the Ministry of Finance, but in fact from the Financial Authority. The highest percentage net to GDP ratio in Ontario's history was under Minister Jim Flaherty in 2000. Since that time, we got some really good ministers of finance, actually, Janet. But just for the record, in terms of expense, and you followed that, Minister. But it's important to note that you can't just throw numbers out there. You've got to be factual. You don't want to confuse the issue with fact. But the truth is, the history of the Conservative Party in Ontario was to download costs to municipalities so they didn't have the heft they could spend on infrastructure. And we changed that. We created Infrastructure Ontario. The result of that is a very clever way to finance with our municipal partners also, because they now have access to Infrastructure Ontario, and that was just changed this year so that they too can get access to these kinds of supports. These big builds that you're seeing everywhere in a recession when we needed it. Virtually every crane that was up around this province was a result of the Ontario government's infrastructure program, and we spent billions and will continue to do so. We've got a record of doing it and finding a way to do it. 100 massive hospital projects that a government in a term could never have done without an organization like Infrastructure Ontario. That model is now being taken to the federal government, to our colleagues in the U.S. We are just learning to do it right, and we're going to continue to do that. Thank you.